Okay, good morning. Thank you, Zmira. Two quick points of introduction. Number one, just to add to the one thing from the bio that's actually relevant to the OU. Just because it just started, it's relevant to the OU, so I'll just mention it. We just started a series from the Women's Initiative in America called TORAH. So we just started a section on Halachic Shabbat, which I happen to be writing. It just started last week. If anybody is interested in it, you can speak to my wife or myself about signing up for the emails. If I say so myself, they're very interesting. They're great. We've got a lot of good feedback so far, but it's an OU project, so feel free to discuss it with us afterwards. Number two, is Mira still here? I hope she didn't walk out already. Is my wife still here? She's somewhere, yeah, thank God she's somewhere. Are you sure? I was going to give her a big thank you, but if she's not here, then I'm not sure. We'll wait a few minutes for the thank you. Okay. I'll wait for the thank you because I think it's nicer if she's actually here to hear it. Hold on. I'll just hold it. Okay. Okay, so until Zmira gets back, so the topic here is yearning for the Beit HaMikdash. A halachic perspective, halachic aspects. So we're going to basically outline here over the next however many minutes we have, I guess around 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever Zmira says. We're going to outline a few different aspects in halacha about looking towards, yearning, thinking about the Beis HaMikdash or Beit HaMikdash, depending on your pronunciation. There are essentially two and maybe three categories of halachic discussions or halachic guidelines that have to do with thinking about the Beit HaMikdash today in our time. So if you look at the source sheet, we're going to skip source number 1 for now. We're going to come back to it in a few minutes. If you look at sources 2, 3, 4, and 5, okay? And what we're going to do here is we're going to basically go do a quick run through, a quick review, not really a review, but really a jumping from point to point, meaning there's a lot of different halachic rules and institutions of the rabbis that have to do with the Beit HaMikdash today. We're going to point out quite a few of them without getting too involved in any of them. Okay, so each one really could be a whole, half an hour, hour sheer by itself. You can feel free to follow up afterwards. If you have quick questions in the middle, feel free to ask. But again, the point here is to mention a lot of different things and not to delve too deeply into any of them. But while we do that, we'll get a good sense of more of a general sense of what Chazal and what the halacha and the Torah want from us in terms of thinking about the Beit HaMikdash today when we don't actually have it. Okay, that's the background. So take a look here at sources 2 and 3. The first category here is called Zecher LeMikdash. You may have heard of it. It means, if you translate the word Zecher, a remembrance or remembering the Mikdash, the temple. So you look here, there's 2 sources here in the Gemara that specifically mention this idea of Zecher LeMikdash, and you're probably familiar with the halachot that they go with. Let's take a look. Source number 2, the Mishnah says here in Sukkah, Barishona haya lulav nital b'mikdash shiva uvamedina yom echad. Okay. Originally, when there was a temple, so the lulav we take on, which holiday is this? Just get our bearings here. Sukkot, right? Okay, we're not yet in Tisha B'Av. On Sukkot, okay? How many days on Sukkot do we shake the lulav and the 4 species, the arba minim? So we, of course, would answer, those of us who do it or who have family members, men who do it, or women can do it also, of course, always recommended, even if it's not absolutely obligatory. How many days of Sukkot do we do that? 7 days, right? But yet, the Mishnah says originally, okay, only in where? In the Mikdash, only in the temple, did they actually shake the lulav and the 4 species 7 days. Uvamedina yom echad, according to at least Rashi, we'll follow Rashi, outside of the Beis HaMikdash, only on the first day did they shake the lulav. That's the mitzvah according to the Torah. What happened in between? So if you look here, you're back. I wanted to give you a thank you, but you weren't here before, so I'm not sure if I should do it now or at the end. If you'll be here at the end, I'll wait till the end. If not, what? Okay, fine. So make sure to come back before the end. I'm not leaving until you come back to give me a thank you. That's called Hakarat HaTov, also very important. Okay. So Uvamedina Yom Echad. Outside of the Beis HaMikdash, only 1 day. Mishachar Beis HaMikdash, but after the temple was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shehei Lulav Nital b'Medina, Shiva Zecher LeMikdash. He instituted that the lulav should be shaken, outside of the Beis HaMikdash for 7 days in remembrance of the Mikdash. The next line we're going to skip for now. That's not really our topic. Yom Hanaf Kula, so we're not going to deal with now. But you see from here that the reason how we today shake the lulav and the arba minim for all 7 days is only based on the institution that we want to imitate the practice in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, very interesting and very important. Okay, that's number one. Look at number 3, and then we'll go back to the middle of source number 2 in a second. First, look at source number 3. This is a Gemara in Menachot. Okay? The Gemara here says the following. It's talking about, and we'll see if you can guess. Amar Rabbi, mitzvah lemimne yome or mitzvah lemimne shvue. There's a mitzvah to count the days, and there's a mitzvah to count the weeks. Can anybody guess which mitzvah we're talking about? Excellent, very good. Okay, you all got it. Maybe you can all give the shir. I can sit back and enjoy. Okay, we have a mitzvah to count days and a mitzvah to count weeks as part of Sfirat HaOmer. However, you look at here, it's actually a dispute in the Gemara. Rav Ashi manu yome umanu shvui. So the rabbis in the house of Rav Ashi, in the yeshiva of Rav Ashi, so they did this. They counted both the days and the weeks. Amemar mana yome v'lo mana shvui. Amemar, so he counted only the days and he did not count the weeks, meaning he said hayom, esrim mishnayim yom laomer, and he didn't add in how many weeks it was. Why? So he says, Amar Zecher LeMikdashu. It's Zecher LeMikdash, meaning the only reason why we count the Omer is only to remember the Omer, the Omer offering of barley that was brought in the Beis HaMikdash and the counting that came from the Omer offering until Shavuot. Meaning today, it's not really the real mitzvah. The real mitzvah is really in the time of the temple when it's together with the Korban Omer, the Omer offering, which was made of barley, brought on the second day of Pesach. And today, it's just to remember what they did back then. Okay? So again, without getting into the halacha, this is a detailed question. And we don't hold like Amemar. We, of course, do count days and weeks, but many opinions, including probably the Shulchan Aruch and including the halacha, seem to accept the idea that our counting of the Omer is still Zecher LeMikdash. It's to remember what happened in the Beis HaMikdash, and therefore today our counting is only rabbinic. It's not biblical. It's not the Torah mitzvah. Okay, everybody with me so far? It's a good point, and that's something which I guess if we were giving the whole shir, we would discuss that more in detail. Come back next year, I guess, during Sfirat HaOmer. It seems to me that because the mitzvah is not complete, so he felt that you didn't need to count the weeks. Okay, why the weeks, not the days? Okay, good question. That's for the longer shir. Okay. Right, also true. Also, there's plenty more where this came from, okay? You're absolutely right. When we take Korech on Pesach at the Seder, we say Zecher LeMikdash Kehil, another remembrance of what happened in the times of the Mikdash when we wrapped together with the Korban Pesach, we had the matzah and the maror, and we put it all together to eat it together, as the Torah says. Excellent. Okay, and again, I'm sure you can think of maybe of more. Sorry, did you have a question? Okay, good. So also, not for the short shir. In the Beis HaMikdash, there actually was an idea that maybe they took it also on Shabbos. For that, we have a rabbinic decree that we say we don't do it on Shabbos because we're afraid for places that don't have an Eruv, we're afraid you might come to carry it, etc., etc. But it means that every day of Sukkot, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, etc., to the end, theoretically, we could take the lulav if it's not Shabbos. Okay, that's basically what it means. But also, good point. Again, that's for the longer shir. Okay, so the concept of Zecher LeMikdash, look at the middle now of source number 2 that we skipped before, right, where it says Gimel Men, which is Gemara. So the Gemara asks, Minalan davdin on Zecher LeMikdash. How do we know that we have this concept of remembering the Mikdash? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra, we have a pasuk which says, it's from Yirmiyahu, Ki nidcha karulach tzion hi doresh ein la. They called you, Zion, Zion, city of Zion, Nidcha, being far off, cast off, pushed away. Zion he, it is Zion, Doresh Ein La, no one is seeking Zion, Zion, intimating the Beis HaMikdash and maybe even the city, but certainly the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, Doresh Ein La, if nobody is seeking Zion, the Gemara says, Mechlal debaya drisha. We see from here that you're supposed to seek it. Meaning what? That you're supposed to think about ways that you can remember what took place in the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? This is all category 1 of Zecher LeMikdash, which we'll come back to in just a second, but just again to get the overall concept here. That's the first category. What's category 2? So category 2 in source number 4 is called Zecher l'churban, to remember the destruction. And here also you'll see here maybe some things that you did know or some things you didn't know. Take a look at source number 4 in the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught. Kishacharav habayit. Let's see, maybe we'll skip this for now. You know what? Actually, we'll skip this for now. Okay, we'll come back to this at the end. Basically, the Gemara here is telling us all what the people did right after the temple was destroyed. People mourned excessively. They wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't eat meat. They wouldn't drink wine. They were so upset about the temple that they couldn't do things that today we would think are relatively normal. We will come back to that part of the Gemara later. Let's look at source number 5. Okay, number 5 is basically the conclusion of the Shulchan Aruch, giving us the bottom line about some of the things that the Gemara talks about in source number 4. But I'm fast forwarding just for efficiency and for time's sake here. So the Gemara says like this: Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, after the temple was destroyed, Tiknu Chachamim, the rabbis instituted. The rabbis in that generation instituted she'ein bonim la'olam binyan mesuyad u'mechuyar kivinyan hamalachim. You shouldn't build a nice fine building which is tiled and plastered in a normal way like those of the kings. In those days, I guess the kings were the ones that built nice buildings, which today, I guess, all of our buildings are really like this, and we'll see in a minute that's relevant. What do? You basically, you put plaster in your house, meaning you basically build the house the normal way with bricks, plaster, and tiles, v'sad basid, okay? Plaster and tiles. But what do? Mishayir makom ama al ama keneged ha-pesach below sid. You leave a space of an amma by an amma, a cubit by a cubit, which again, we won't go into the measurement of that right now, but about this size or so, this size roughly, without any plaster. Okay, what's the idea? The idea is to remember as a zecher l'churban, to remember the fact that the temple was destroyed. Okay, ukshachasa nosa isha. The Shulchan Aruch continues, when you have a bride marrying a groom. Lokeach efer maklav v'nosin barosho v'makom anachas tefillin. Okay, then he puts a certain kind of ashes on his head in the place where you place your tefillin. That's what the chassan does. Again, why? We'll see in a second. But I said it already, but we'll see it again in a minute. Another one. This one is even more well known. V'yesh makomos. This is Haggah. That's the Ramah of Moshe Isser. This. V'yesh makomos shenagu l'shaber kos b'shas chuppah. Some places have the custom to do what? To break a glass cup at the time of the chuppah. Okay, that I think many of us have seen or experienced. Or to put a black cloth on the some type of mourning on the head of a chassan. Today, what's more accepted today is to actually put the ashes on the head of the chassan. Not everybody does it, but many people do it. Why do we do these things? So he says, the reason for all of these institutions is to remember Yerushalayim. Shenemar im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yimini, im lo eles Yerushalayim al rosh simchasi. Again, famous pasuk. We say, if I will forget Yerushalayim, I'll forget my right hand. If I don't go up to Yerushalayim, if I don't make Yerushalayim higher or more important than the rosh simchasi, the head, the top of my rejoicing. Meaning, you're always supposed to remember Yerushalayim at a time of joy. Your greatest time of joy at a wedding, that's when you have to make sure to remember Yerushalayim. When you build a house, that's when you have to remember to the destruction of the Beis Mikdash and Yerushalayim. Okay, so we're not going to go into these in detail now. You may or may not be familiar with these things. It's worthwhile to note that these things are recorded in the halacha. The first one about leaving a section of the wall next to your door that's not tiled and plastered. So again, putting a section of your wall next to your door, it's not so commonly done, but really according to the halacha, it seems that it is supposed to be done, at least when you build a house. Those of us who bought a house after it was already built, there's a question, do you have to pull apart the house? It's not so clear. You actually have to pull it out, take out part of the wall. But some people say you do, and some people say maybe you don't need to. But it's important to be aware that there is such an idea. Okay, if you ever get to the point of being relevant, it's something which, in theory, is good to do, and if not, at least to be aware there is such an idea, even if it's not so practiced today. As I mentioned, the idea of a chassan putting ashes on the head of a groom, that's more accepted today. Again, important to remember. Breaking a glass under the chuppah, even more accepted today. The last two we're not going to go into now, but there's another one here which talks about not having music today. This one is scary. You don't want to hear about this one because you may never be able to listen to music again. Just kidding. But there's a discussion about that also, that even if you say, okay, fine, during the 3 weeks, and even Sfirat HaOmer, okay, fine, I'll put away my music. But some people say, based on the Ramah, the Shulchan Aruch here, that really the whole year round, you're not supposed to listen to music to commemorate the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. That's scary. So how do you deal with that one? Again, we're not going to go into that now. There are a lot of poskim that defend the common custom that you are allowed to, but some say maybe concerts are not allowed. Bottom line today, I'll tell you the bottom line is that most poskim today say that we are allowed to, we can do it. It's been done for many years, and the main reason why is just because we can't live without music. It's too hard. We just can't do it. But to keep in mind that there is such an idea that maybe to not listen to music today because of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, it's a different perspective on what we're supposed to be feeling. And again, that's part of the reason, by the way, why during Sfirat HaOmer and the 3 weeks, at least if you ask me, it is worthwhile to recommend to try not to listen to music, even though there are reasons that it might be allowed. Again, for teenagers these days, this does not go over well. Again, we mentioned my kids before. Not an easy one for some of them, at least, to get rid of music for 3 weeks. So I don't force them. But anybody who asks me, what do you recommend? What do you think? I tell them that, I think that ideally, really, you shouldn't listen to music, even if there are bases for allowing it. What's the reason why? Because really, it could be that during the entire year, you shouldn't listen to music. But okay, fine. The rest of the year, we use all the leniencies. But at the very least, during the 3 weeks, and probably also during Sfirat HaOmer, at least to keep in mind, there is such an idea to have it in our mind when we don't listen to music. There's a reason for it, and to remember what it's all about is very worthwhile. Okay, again, that's not my idea, by the way. That's Rav Moshe Feinstein's idea. Okay, not just him. A lot of poskim say it, but Rav Moshe is one of the ones that specifically elaborates about that idea. I just summarized it in like 2 lines. Okay, a couple quick questions, and then we'll move on. Zamir, what time do we have until?
When you're, just like cooking and you're playing.
That's what we're talking about. That's theoretically would be the problem for all these things. What I should mention is that the slower kinds of music, the calming kind of music, there are many poskim that say that's not included. Why? Because that's not something which makes you, it makes you, we want to prevent you from being too happy. That's part of the idea. So slow music and, what they call shirei neshama in Hebrew, you're familiar with that terminology, that's already more reason to be lenient, certainly during the rest of the year for sure. But even during the 3 weeks, many poskim say, even if you're machmir, slower music is probably okay. But you have to know what is slower music. It's hard to tell the difference, and then sometimes it blurs, and then it gets into faster music. There's all sorts of questions about this, which I'm not going to get into now. But the faster music is definitely the type, regardless of when you're listening to it. Again, this is not our topic now. I think I spoke about this once at a different time. Music which is like background music, which is only in order to focus you. Like if you're driving, let's say, or exercising, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So many poskim say even for faster music that may be okay, because the goal is not to get you to dance or to be happy. The goal is just to either focus you or to give you some sort of background music so you won't fall asleep, or you'll be able to exercise better or something like that. Again, this is all the short version. You really need a longer share. Yeah. Okay. Another great question, which we could spend another half an hour on. The answer is, take a guess what the answer might be for that one. A cappella music. Is a cappella music included without actual instruments? What do you think the answer is? Take a guess, or anybody else? Very good. Excellent. Machloket. It's a big machloket among the poskim. If you want to know my opinion, again, this is a newer question because they didn't do a cappella, 50 years ago, or Moshe didn't talk about that, but the modern poskim talk about it. My opinion is that, strictly speaking, it's permissible. The main issue is actual instrumental music. However, there is definitely room to be machmir, especially for the kind of a cappella music where they process, I don't know what the word is exactly, but the music, they go to a studio and they blend it together. And when you come out, you hear their voices. It's not totally just voices. It's like part of this is, the sound, it's, it's partially artificial, and it makes it sound much better. So for those, there's definitely room for chumrah, for being machmir based on what I was just saying now. But I don't tell people that you have to do that. If you ask me personally, strictly speaking, it's permissible. And if you need leniencies, that's definitely a good leniency to have. So all the stuff with, the Maccabees, and now these days you can find a cappella music everywhere. Just search online, Hebrew and English. You can find tons of it. They've made a lot of a cappella music for all of the other songs that have, instrumental music the rest of the year. Yeah, other question. So that's part, again, we're not going to get into it now, but the Ramah in the source that we didn't get into right now, when he mentions about, not to have musical instrument, part of the idea that they say there is when it's in the Beis HaMishta. It's the last line in source number 5. If you want to see it inside. Beis HaMishta is like while you're part of a merry occasion, when you're drinking. That's part of, they talk about maybe when you're drinking wine or other things. That's one of the leniencies, okay? But not everybody accepts it. Even the Ashkenazi poskim, it's not accepted over, by everybody. But again, bottom line today, because of a lot of different reasons, we generally do rely on that as one of our leniencies. Again, as I mentioned, concerts is more of a question. Some major poskim today are actually machmir on concerts. But again, there's room to be lenient. You don't have to feel bad if you go to a concert as long as you're doing it for a good reason and it has something to do with your, again, if you ask me at least, a spiritual type of experience would be really ideal, the best type. Yeah, other question. You had a second one, right? Okay, also a good question that I may have spoken about at a different time. That answer, the answer to that question would take about an hour and a half or 2 hours to answer. The answer is for this question of music, it's pretty much the same, though again, there's more reason to be more strict during the 3 weeks and especially during the 9 days. Okay, we won't go into it now, but Rav Eliezer Melamed, whoever's heard of him, the Penine Halacha, a whole nice series of Halacha Sfarim. So he has a nice breakdown where he explains why maybe the 3 weeks is a little more lenient and the 9 days is more strict. He says during the 9 days, even if you're lenient about, let's say, the slower music I mentioned before, so he says during the 9 days, it could be you have to be more strict. Not all slower music, but slower music, which is just normal slower music. If it's slower music specifically related to the period of time, let's say like a song like that, which is designed to get you to yearn for the Beis HaMikdash or to feel the Avelos, that already might be different. But just regular slow songs like, I don't know, these days, I guess Yishai Ribo is really the inn of slow songs. He's like the king of it. So those kind of songs I would say, could be during the 3 weeks, or Malamed would say is okay, but during the 9 days, not necessarily unless it's specifically related to a mournful theme. That's the short answer, again, to the question, which, again, could take another hour to answer. Other aspects of halacha, you're absolutely right, are very different, okay? Most of the aspects of mourning during the 3 weeks are not present during Sfira. Some are, but most are not. Who else had questions? Yeah. Right. Also a very important question. For that type of question, in general, the poskim are makil. Okay. Most recently, I think it was a couple years ago during Corona/COVID, whatever you called it, when it was at the height. So there were some poskim that said specifically for that reason, you can have not just for individual people, but for a large group of people, like anybody that feels that they need it, they allowed them to listen to music during Sfirat HaOmer, and if it was relevant during the 3 weeks, certainly for an individual person. Today also, there absolutely is room to be lenient about that. But it's the kind of thing that I would recommend a person should ask their rabbinic mentor or authority first before just deciding to do it, just so they should understand that it's something which is not just automatic. You have to realize it's a special situation. Okay. Yeah, did you figure out what time we have until? Excuse me? Okay, fine. So we'll give 2 or 3 more minutes of questions and then we'll try to move on. Yeah. That's a different issue. That's also true, but again, we're not going to go into that right now. I'll give you the 1 minute idea is that there was a long-standing custom, mainly in the old city. It's not so much in the rest of Yerushalayim, though again, maybe it used to be, but these days nobody follows that anywhere else, I don't think, and even in the old city, it's iffy these days. There was a long-standing custom in the old city to not have instrumental music, even for weddings. They would have, I think, just a drummer, and some people still do. If you get married in the old city today, I don't know how much they enforce it, but there are definitely the old-timers for sure still have just a drummer, I think, and nothing else. That's part of the same idea. What'd you say? Is that true? Okay. Nothing else. Okay, great. I was not familiar with, so thank you for sharing that. That is an additional custom that they had in Yerushalayim that relates to the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. That's not necessarily the same thing as we're talking about here. That would be all year round. We're talking about, again, I guess I would say like this, that is more based on what we did not study here in source number 5 about the idea of Lolan Again B'Klei Shir, that whole thing. It's a little bit more based on that, but it's a developed custom based on that point. So that's not something that we would say necessarily has the same rules as what we're talking about now during the 3 weeks and the 9 days. The today, let's say during the 3 weeks, a piano would be a problem. Okay, meaning I would not say you can play a piano during the 3 weeks or the 9 days. Again, without getting into the whole question, if you're practicing, if your kid is taking lessons, that's all a discussion. Not so clear what the answer is. There is room for leniency, but again, a longer point. Any other last questions? Yeah. That's exactly what my next point was going to be. So you steered us back in the direction that I was going to continue. So thank you. Okay. Were there any other quick questions about the other points before we get back to? Okay. All right. So what we see here basically is there's two models that we saw: Zecher mikdash and Zecher churban, with two different psukim that were quoted here. Okay. One in Zecher mikdash, we learned about the pasuk in Yirmiyahu about Tzion he doresh ein la. There's no one that's seeking Tzion, and we have to go and seek Tzion and the Beis Hamikdash by remembering and by copying, so to speak, imitating certain practices that were done in the Beis Hamikdash. That was number one. Number two, we saw Zecher l'churban, to remember the destruction, and there we saw the pasuk of Imeshkechech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini, which is the Shulchan Aruch brought, which is based on the Gemara in Bava Basra and source number 4. So before we address your point directly, let's take a look first, very briefly, again, just in terms of time, very briefly in source number 1. So Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, so he noted these two different concepts that we mentioned of Zecher l'mikdash and Zecher l'churban. He says it's interesting, why do we have two different concepts and two different psukim, and what's the difference between them? So he has a fascinating idea here. Look at source number 1. This is how it's quoted from him in his name. Shemati Agon Rav Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, Shlita, when it was written, now he's Zatzal, of course. There are two types of ways to remember the Beis Hamikdash. What are they? As we said, Yesh Zecher l'mikdash. There is a remembrance of the mikdash, to remember it as it was when it was built and in its beauty, in all of its glory. This is the idea of taking the lulav, and we mentioned also of Sfirat HaOmer. He says, Zecher shel simcha. This is a happy, a joyous type of remembering. That's from the Doresh Ein La. Nobody's seeking Tzion. We have to go seek it, meaning out of a sense of happiness. We want to remember the good times of the Beis Hamikdash by copying it, imitating the practices of, remember what it was at the time of this and this and this and this. Again, we won't go into this now, but just another time this comes up for us during the year. Anybody who's in Shul on Yom Kippur, during Musaf, in the middle, we go through the whole Avoda, the temple service on Yom Kippur. And, if you do it right, or if your chazan does it right, you can almost feel like you're there. And Rav Soloveitchik, by the way, himself used to say that he and his grandfather, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik, felt that they were transported to a different world during the Avoda on Yom Kippur. And at the end, we say all the parts that people say very fast, or they don't say at all. It says all of this was at the time that when the Beis Hamikdash was in its beauty and its glory. The song of Mara Cohen, those of you who are familiar with, beautiful, beautiful song, can be jumping up and down, singing and dancing. And after that, we're plunged into mourning to say this was all back then, but today we lost everything. And Rav Soloveitchik says the first type of Zecher l'mikdash is the happy type. When we remember the Avoda on Yom Kippur, we remember the Kohen Gadol trying to get us forgiveness and the signs that we were forgiven. This is all great. We're happy. We're rejoicing. We remember the positive. Then in the last paragraph of source number 1, he says, Yesh Zecher l'churban hamikdash al Zecher ze yiskinu chacham mishasad b'sid zarek l'shayar davar muat. The second type is to remember the destruction, the negative, the mourning. And that's what we said about leaving the part of your wall unplastered. This is an interesting one, which we didn't get into, which I'm scared to even bring up, but there is such a concept that maybe when you set a table for a large meal, you should leave a little bit of food on the side or a little bit of part of the table empty that you don't eat from or you don't have food on, to remember the Beis Hamikdash, to remember the destruction. There's a question why that is not always done today. There are plenty of answers, but some people say still maybe it's appropriate, if possible, to leave a little bit of food or a little bit of a spot that you don't eat from. Again, it's not so practiced today, and most poskim say you don't need to do it today for various reasons, based on at least how their meals. In earlier times, the meals were a little different than today, but it's on the books. It's something to remember. Some people say that based on this, women who make jewelry, they shouldn't put on all their jewelry at the same time. Again, this is also a discussion, which is a much longer version for now. The bottom line that the poskim say today, the Sfarim today say that wearing jewelry today is fine, but maybe there's an idea that you shouldn't put on all of your jewelry all at the same time. Again, today also, not everybody accepts this as the common custom. The Mishnah Berurah already points out from the Chai Adam that there are many people that do not keep these customs today, even though it's from the Gemara, it's in the Shulchan Aruch. So those that do not keep it, there is what to base it on. But those that want to rely on it, that want to keep it. So again, in terms of the jewelry, the idea seems to be, according to the Sfarim today, it's not just one piece of jewelry. It means to put on every single piece of jewelry that you have all at the same time. Then maybe that's not the most appropriate thing to remember the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, and then he mentions also there the idea, Rav Soloveitchik, about the ashes on the head of the chassan. This is all from the pasuk of Yishkachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. We need to remember the destruction of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash. This is the mourning. This is the second type that we call Zecher L'Churban. So here, interestingly enough, if you think about it, the Zecher L'Mikdash, the points we mentioned, they're only certain times of the year. The Zecher L'Mikdash is not something which you have every single day at every single moment of your day. So that's one interesting point, that you can say that the Zecher L'Mikdash, that Chazal wanted us to remember at important times during the year to do things to imitate what they did in the Beis HaMikdash, the positive things like the Lulav and the Sfirat HaOmer. In terms of Zecher L'Churban, so here also, again, there are some things we said that are maybe more common. The question about the music and the question about the Tachshitim maybe is something which is more regular every day. But today for us, as I mentioned, we've sort of made it such that it's not so relevant on a regular basis. It's, we have leniencies that basically make it that it's not something which applies all the time, maybe at very specific times. And we mentioned also the idea of the wedding, of the ashes and breaking the cup. Those are all things that you mentioned, things that come up at very important times of our lives. Meaning that the Zecher L'Churban also does not necessarily, at least the way that we have it today, does not necessarily seem to be something which you do, which you remember, you have in your mind every single day and every single minute of your day, or even every single week. It's something which comes up at very important times of your life, or very unusual certain circumstances where maybe we would practice them, but otherwise not necessarily. So that's very interesting. Meaning we want to remember the Churban, but we're not going to drive ourselves crazy about it, that at least our own day-to-day life today, every single minute, we can't function normally, okay? And that's basically what the Gemara said in source number 4, which I'm running out of time, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we'll read it just so you mentioned it very quickly, okay? In source number 4. I'll read part of it and I'll summarize the rest. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, after the destruction of the second temple, Rabu Prushan Be'Yisrael, there were a lot of, I guess we'd call them ascetics, meaning people that went, reclusive. They would basically, they were treated from regular life. They didn't eat meat anymore. They stopped drinking wine. And Rabbi Yoshua basically went to them and he said to them, Amar lahen, B'ni or Banai, my children, why are you not eating meat and drinking wine? What did they answer? Can we eat meat where we bring we used to bring meat for part of our sacrifices in the Beis HaMikdash? How can we possibly eat meat today? Now the Beis HaMikdash is no more. Can we drink wine? The wine libations in the temple were from wine. Now they're no more. Can we possibly drink wine? So he says, well, wait a second. If you're going to say that, and I'll summarize this, but you can look inside if you want to see the rest. He says, what about lechem? What about bread? We had the menachos, the meal offerings, which were made out of bread or matzah, out of flour. Are you going to say that you can't eat bread? Fruits, bikurim? They brought fruits from the bikurim. Are you going to say no fruits today? That's it. Sorry. What about water? They had the water libation on Sukkot, the Minisach HaMayim, right? Are you going to say no more drinking water? What was his point? His point is you can't take the Avelos to an extreme. You certainly have to remember the Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash in various ways, as we said, but you can't go too far, basically. So he says that's where we get to the point that, when you build a house, then you should leave off part of the wall from being plastered and built normally. When you have a meal, maybe leave out a little bit of the meal. Again, that based on what we said before is a question, but that's his idea. Yeshua was very smart. He was wise. He understood you can't stop functioning normal lives. The same way when a loved one passes away. So you have a period of time, a short period, where you have to sit Shiva, and that's when you mourn. After that, you never forget the person, God forbid. But at some point, you need to figure out a way to get back to regular life. And if you can't, then you need to figure out that something is blocking you. You need to figure out how to move yourself back, because if you can't move on and move forward while still remembering what happened, then it's going to be difficult for you to function normally. The same thing is true about the Beis HaMikdash. We have to remember it in the various ways we said, but you can't get stuck on it. If you live your whole life only, thinking about the Beis Hamikdash and not doing anything which relates at all to the temple, you can't live normally. And that Chazal never said. Okay, we have 10 minutes now for the second part of yearning for the Mikdash. And this, I think, is where I wanted to go to now, that despite what we said so far, that we have periodic reminders of where the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to remember it, the destruction, and when it was in its glory. We have little reminders that we give ourselves basically every day on a more regular basis, which can help us yearn for the Beis Hamikdash, think about it, and not just to mourn for it or to think, oh, how great it was, but to yearn for it, to give us a sense of we want it back. We want the Beis Hamikdash to come back. And that's something which, again, in theory, we should always, of course, be thinking about. But again, we live normal lives, and we don't always think about it. We think about our normal lives, which, again, these days, right now, normal life is not so easy either. We think about all the difficulties that we have today. But in a sense, this is obviously all based on the fact that we don't have the Beis Hamikdash back yet. So what ways can we do practically little things we can think about during our lives and every day to remember and to yearn for the Beis Hamikdash? So here in the next however many minutes we have, 8, 9, 10 minutes, I'm going to quickly run through a couple different points that you're all familiar with, I'm sure, or at least some of them you are, that you can feel free to take one or two of them and decide that you want to try to be a little bit more careful or take on, if you haven't done them before, these kind of things as, a merit to remember to fulfill, to fulfill this mitzvah a little bit more of yearning for the Beis Hamikdash in a way which is practical. So let's take a look here. Look at source number 6 and 7. So the first one is called korbanos. Korbanot, what's that? Of course, not the offering of the sacrifices in the temple, but rather every day in davening in the morning before shacharit, there's a section in your siddur called korbanot, called korbanos. Okay? Many of you may not say it, some of you maybe do, but it's there. And you see in source 6, the Ramah already points out, V'omrim parashas hatamid, every day you're supposed to say the section from the Torah that tells us of the mitzvah to bring the daily offering, the korban tamid, every day. And we do it, we say it, number one, to remember it, to be as if we brought it. We can't bring it, but we want to say as if. The Gemara says, if you talk about it, if you learn, if you recite the section of the korban, it's as if you brought it. And part of it is also to say we want to show that we want it back. Okay, we'll get to that in source number 9. Also, the same idea, but at the end of the section of Korbanos in the morning, you'll see there's a little paragraph there where we ask Hashem to bring back the Beis Hamikdash and the Korbanos, which we'll see again. We'll see the source in source number 9. But that paragraph is very relevant to say the section of the Parsha of the Tamid and all the other sections of Korbanos at the beginning. So you may ask me, okay, that's very nice. So do men say it? Well, the truth is not all men say it either. And even if they do, they don't say everything. But okay, fine. At least parts of it. The Parsha of the Tamid, if you look in your siddur, that's probably one of the most important sections of Korbanos. So you may ask me, well, are women supposed to say that? Should women say that? Do they have to say it? So your first answer might be no. Does anybody say yes? Yeah. Okay, good for you. If you say it, wonderful. Those who don't say it, you don't have to feel bad because, yeah. Yes, exactly. Very good. Torah is also good, but the Talmud is even more significant. So look here again. Interestingly enough, if you look at source number 7, so the Be'er Halacha, which is written by the Chavetz Chaim, the Mishnah Berurah, so he says, "Atam da chayavos lilmod hadinim shelahem." He's talking about a different question of Birkas HaTorah. Okay, women do have to say Birkas HaTorah every day. Okay, that is something that you should do. If you don't, and if you do, great. Why? Because women also are obligated to learn the halachos that are relevant to them. Okay, very nice. What does that have to do with korbanos? Look at this. Women have to say the section of korbanos also. Just like they're chayav in tefillah. Wow. Okay, that's a new one. What's he talking about? Korbanos. So look in source number 8, the Sefer by Rabbi Nissel, Rabbi Nachum Nissel, called Rikshay Lev, about what are women obligated to daven. So he says, women are obligated to say Parashas HaTamid. They are not obligated to say the rest of the korbanos. That's from Rav Scheinberg. He understands when the Be'er Halacha that we just read in source 7, when he talks about the korbanos, what did he mean? He meant the Tamid. That's the parsha that he meant. Some people say not like that. They disagree. Look at the next paragraph. Some posts can maintain that women are not obligated to recite Parashas HaTamid. Nevertheless, when time permits, it is appropriate for them to do so. Okay, so not everybody agrees that they have to say the korbanos. Korbanos was done in the Beis Hamikdash. It may be a time-bound mitzvah. Maybe they're not obligated to. Okay, fine. But still, if you have time, it's appropriate to do so. Turn the page. Some posts can require women to recite the entire korbanos section, and some people say they have to say everything. So common custom, I think, is not necessarily that women have to say korbanos. Some do, and some would say maybe the Parshas Tammuz is great. What I want to say here is that if you're looking for a way to yearn for the Beis HaMikdash, something to add a little more or to continue doing if you do it already, but to keep in your mind, this is my way to show Hashem that I want the Beis HaMikdash to come back. This is a great opportunity to take something on. And by the way, always, if you take something extra on, always say that it's bli neder. It should be with, not an official vow, so that if you stop it at some point, you don't get stuck having to think about doing what's called hatarat nedarim, to get rid of your vows. That's, again, a more complicated discussion than right now. Always say if you're going to do something, even, if you say you're going to do it once or twice or three times, still say bli neder. I'm doing it bli neder, not as a vow. I'm taking it on just, when I'm able to, bli neder. But certainly one great way to do something related to the korbanos, to daven and to have this type of yearning for the Beis HaMikdash. That's the first one. Let me do a couple ones. Let's hold on the questions till we're finished, just to try to finish some of these points here. Number 2, this is source number 9 now. The Ramah in Simon Kuf Chav Gimel. This is the paragraph that appears at the end of the Korbanos section in the morning, but it also appears at the end of Shmona Esrei. This one I'm assuming most of you are familiar with. V'nagu lomar achar kach yiratzon milefanecha Hashem Elokeinu. I'm adding in the words that we say now, at least for Ashkenazim. Shibaneh Beit HaMikdash Imher v'yameinu v'tein chalkeinu b'toratecha. We want the temple to be built speedily in our days, and we say v'shav navadcha b'yirah. We should serve Hashem you kimei olam, just like in days of yore, etc., with the sacrifices, etc. Why? Because Shmona Esrei also is in place in a certain sense for the service in the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, at the end of Shmona Esrei, we request, we seek, we yearn, we ask Hashem for the temple. We should be able to actually to perform the actual real temple service. So that paragraph also, that's the one that, okay, fine, maybe everybody says it, and by the way, even though the Ramah says this, the Ramah is for Ashkenazim, Sephardim have this also. Sephardim also in the Sephardi Sidurs, you'll see this, a slight variation, but the same idea. This is a great way to say, everybody just mumbles that line, nobody even thinks about what it means. Take, an extra 20 seconds after you say Shmona Esrei to yearn for the Mikdash by saying this line with Kavana. And this, you don't have to say, it's not even the Korban, the Parshas HaTamid, which takes a little bit longer. This is easy. You probably say it anyway, but just take an extra 20 seconds to say it with Kavana and think about what you're saying. This is our way to yearn for the Mikdash. Okay, one or two more points before we finish up. Source number 10 in the Mishnah Brura. So here he quotes the Shalah, the Rav Horowitz, the Shnei L'chod HaBrit. He has another thing, Shebechol Suda, you may be familiar with this, Yomar al Narot Bavel. After every meal that you have with bread, before you say Birkat HaMazon, the Shlah has this custom that you say in Tehillim, Parak Kuf Lamed Zayin 137, Al Naros Bavel. This paragraph which talks about being in Bavel and being in exile, and this is where the section of Imesh Kachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Chimini, this is where, that's the parak where it comes from. So here also, not everybody does this. And by the way, the second part everybody does. Then he says you should say on Shabbos and other days that are happy days, you say Shira Malos. That many of us do. Al Naros Bavel is less accepted. Why? I have no idea. But somehow, this part, I guess it's sad. It's the destruction. So here also, again, this is more about what we call Zecher l'Churban, because this is the idea of, the destruction. But certainly, if you're looking for other ways during your day to think about adding to, show your yearning for the Mikdash, it could be that to start saying Al Naros Bavel on a regular basis, again, bli neder, could be another idea to think about. Maybe this is something to add on, a nice thing to do before you say Birkat HaMazon, after eating bread, to add to the idea of remembering the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, next point. I think we're out of time here, so I'll just really skip here. I'll just to summarize points outside, really. Sources 11 and 12, this is about Musaf. Okay, Musaf, we recite the extra service of Shmona Esrei, we recite on Shabbos and Yom Tov and Rosh Chodesh. So here, interestingly enough, we know, of course, that the Musaf itself, the service, is designed to commemorate the Korban Musaf, the extra offering of the special days in the Beis HaMikdash. And here, again, in source number 11, the Beis Yosef says that the whole thing of we say on Musaf is also for the Geula, that the Geula, the redemption, is supposed to be mentioned in the tefillah of Musaf, and even especially on Shabbos, that's keeping Shabbos also is a good way to help bring the Geula closer. Again, we'll skip the source, but it's a nice idea. Again, when you daven Musaf on Shabbos, that's something to keep in mind. Do women have to daven Musaf? That's source number 12. It's machlokas. Okay, the Mishnah Brura brings down here in source 12, there are different opinions whether women are obligated to daven Musaf on Shabbos or not. But certainly everybody agrees that if women want to daven Musaf, they can. And by the way, even the Sephardi poskim say that. Rav Yitzchak Yosef writes that in the Yalkut Yosef. Totally fine if you want to do it. And again, in the context of what we're saying, absolutely recommended to daven Musaf. And certainly to have kavana, that when you say the words, we're talking about remembering the korbanos in the Beis Hamikdash of Shabbos and the other days. And part of Musav is asking Hashem to bring it back. Okay? Bring back the korbanos. If you look at the paragraphs there, that's part of what we have in mind when we say Musaf. So a very important point about keeping Musaf in mind. And then we'll skip the inside part here, but benching. Okay, Rachem and benching. The paragraph of Rachem mentions al malchus. Al tzio mishkan kvodecha. Okay, tzio mishkan kvodecha is the Mishkan, is the Beis Hamikdash. So you remember every time when you bench, also you should have in mind the idea of the Beis Hamikdash as well. The paragraph of Rachem, of course, Yaakov Shweki made to a nice, beautiful song. When you sing the song, that's wow, you're like crying. It's such a beautiful song and thinking about it. But when you bench the words, though, we mumble them so fast and get through them, you don't even think about what you're saying. So again, this is a good opportunity to think here also about yearning for Rachem. Hashem should have mercy on the Beis Hamikdash and Sion and everything else. Certainly another good opportunity. Last point, and we're out of time. We don't have time to read it inside, but in source 15, there's a letter from the Chafetz Chaim where he talks about the importance of learning about the laws of the Beis Hamikdash. And he says part of you look at the bold 5 words there in bold, he said the learning that has to do with Torah, Avoda, about the service of the Beis Hamikdash, v'tikvas Yeshua Yachad, and to hope, to yearn for the Beis Hamikdash, that's a wonderful learning to learn about those things. So most of us here are probably not going to be spending our time learning the Rambam and the Gemara about, how do they bring the korbanos. But what I'll tell you, and we'll end with this, there are a lot of good videos today out there. Just search on Google. You can find, videos on Beis Hamikdash. And you'll find all these virtual tours of the Beis Hamikdash, the third one, the second one, even without any, serious learning, just to look at some of those things and to see, different parts of the Beis Hamikdash and some of the aspects they put together in Machon HaMikdash and these visual things. It's a beautiful thing. It'll really tug at your heart, I think, tugged at mine. And that's another good way, maybe not every day, but once in a while to think about this idea of the Chafetz Chaim of learning things related to the Beis Hamikdash. So we'll add in today videos related to the Beis Hamikdash as well. There are plenty of them out there. These are all good ways to think about not just the Zecher LeMikdash and Zecher LeChurban, which come up once in a while, but on a regular basis to yearn for the Mikdash, to think about the fact that we want it back. And Be'ezrat Hashem, the more of us and the more times, and the sooner that we yearn for the Mikdash, and also, of course, Avas Chinam, which we're not getting into, that's not our topic today, but everything else related to that, Be'ezrat Hashem, it should get us to the point that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looks down on us and says, finally, they're ready, and continues to speed up the process of the Geula even faster than it's going right now. Be'ezrat Hashem, we should get to that point. I'd like to thank you for listening. And now, just 1 minute, I'm sorry to thank Zmira. So number one, thank you for everything you do at home. Zmira's birthday was yesterday, you should know, so she gets a happy birthday. Bet Tammuz was her birthday, so Rosh Chodesh Tammuz is not just a nice Rosh Chodesh, but it's also a happy birthday for Zmira, for Bet Tammuz. Thank you for everything that you do at home for us and our kids, and I can't even describe how much, I don't know how she does everything she does. She's here, she's running around all day at the OU, but even when she's home, we have 9 kids at home. And somehow she manages to be the one that they all come to. They'll come to me for things that, the normal things, but anything that something's really wrong, they don't come to me. It's to her. So thank you for everything that you do at home. When she was in America right now, she was away for a week and a half. She was so busy with the simcha that we had in America. My nephew got married, also talking to my kids at home, and also, believe it or not, running 5 OU programs in America, and also on top of the OU programs here somehow. How does she do it? I have no idea. But everybody should give Zmira a round of applause for everything that she does for the OU Center. And Asher Koach.
That's hopeful, and that's a constant.
That's exactly what I was trying to get across, and I left out the line on the Chafetz Chaim in source 15. But in source 15, he mentions that exactly. The second to last line, you'll see he brings it in there. That's exactly the idea that we wanted to get across here. It's not just Zecher LeMikdash, Zecher LeChurban, it's also Tzipisa Yeshua, the comment in Chazal, asking how will you show Hashem when you get up to Shemayim, how will you show Hashem that you yearned also for the salvation of the Beis Hamikdash? Thank you.